You've hit play on the Screen Companion, a show about helping you to decide what to watch tonight. Here we are talking about Jack Ryan movies. Hunt for Red October from 1990, Patriot Games from 92, 2002 Sum of All Fears, and Jack Ryan's Shadow Recruit from 2014. Using the book chronology of Jack Ryan's life story, we begin our look at the movies with Patriot Games. A radical element within the IRA makes a bold daytime kidnapping attempt on a royal in London, only to be thwarted by visiting American naval professor and former CIA analyst Jack Ryan. Ryan gets back to the States a hero, but one of the kidnappers, Sean Miller, seeks revenge for the death of his accomplice brother at Ryan's hand. After an attempt is made on Ryan's family, he goes back to the CIA in order to track down Miller, knowing one of them has to go down. Pat, what kind of Jack Ryan is Harrison Ford? What superlative sets him apart from the other actors who took on the role?
He's definitely older than the other actors that have played him.
Nice.
Yeah.
You ageist.
I know. Besides that, I would almost say like more action-y and less brainy. Jack Ryan is supposed to be an intelligent CIA operative, and I think he might be the least intelligent Jack Ryan.
Ooh, interesting take. What comes to mind when you say that?
I didn't feel the Patriot Games had as much analysis in it as some of the other films that we watched. You look at the Hunt for Red October, and that's really about him being inside the mind of a submarine commander and understanding why he's doing what he's doing, and really anticipating all of his moves. You look at Jack Ryan in Shadow Recruit, he's a data miner and he can hack into banking systems. You look at Harrison Ford, he's teaching history at the Naval Academy.
Well, yeah, at the start of the movie, but I mean, there's a whole part in the middle where he's doing investigative work.
I would agree with that. He does do some investigative work, but I feel like we don't see as much critical thinking, if you will.
Well, if Pat is on that end and I'm on the right end, Andrew, where do you fall on our scale?
I agree that he's the oldest. I can see the point where it seems like there's less analysis in this one. Kind of is. It's just all in the middle when he's trying to figure out where they are. Because the movie starts, he shoots some dudes, then the family gets caught, and then analysis, and then he shoots some more dudes. He kills a couple other guys.
So, you just waded on in like John Wayne. Why'd you do it? What were you thinking, man?
I don't know. I wasn't thinking.
That's it? You sound like some of my students.
Just pissed me off. I couldn't just stand there and watch him shoot those people right in front of me. It was rage. Pure rage. Just made me mad.
Well, here's hoping you never get mad at me, man.
It was definitely more action-oriented, I think, Patriot Games versus the other ones. I think Shadow Recruit had, I would say, the second most action in terms of, like, action sequences where it's stylish. I was distracted by, in Patriot Games, when he zoomed in and then he's just like, tits, and I thought of you immediately, Frank.
I was going to say something about that too, when he's just like, boobs, that must be the woman that I saw. By the way, the woman that he saw when he was under gunfire in two different scenes of the movie, he somehow spotted and identified this woman. And then he saw boobs on a grainy satellite image and determined that it was the exact same woman.
Well, he speculates that it's the same woman, and at first he brings it to Greer's attention. I think he's
I think he's assistant director. He's an admiral in the Navy, and I think he's assistant CIA director.
Okay, so Ryan goes to him, mentions the woman, and then Greer asks him, "Are you sure it's the same woman?" And you see that conflict on Jack Ryan's face, and he has to admit, "I'm not 100% sure." James Earl Jones says something like, "Well, Jack, who is ever 100% sure?" Let's blow ourselves a terrorist training camp, shall we? If we had all four of these Jack Ryans in a room and administered a test, who do you think would get the highest score?
In terms of like an academic IQ test of sorts?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I would probably say Alec Baldwin.
Well, okay, I'll take that. Obviously, I'm pushing for my boy Harrison Ford.
I would say that Harrison Ford is probably my favorite Jack Ryan because he's probably my favorite actor of the group in terms of action films he's ever done, like Air Force One, one of my favorite action films of all time.
Oh, Air Force One is great.
He might be my favorite Jack Ryan. I don't think he's necessarily the best Jack Ryan in any way, but he's probably my favorite one.
Okay, since you said Alec Baldwin, Pat, before I get off this topic, let me try one more time. Let's say there's a naval history exam. Which Jack Ryan is going to get the best score?
Ooh, probably Harrison Ford, Jack Ryan.
Okay, good. Then I can edit out all the other stuff you said against Harrison Ford, and I'll just keep that one part in.
I love it.
You know the deal, Jack. Come on, you are involved.
Don't
That
tell
is
me
not
about
good
the deal. I know
process.
the deal.
You are the victim of a crime, and that does not make for the best analysis. Even if you knew something about terrorism, which you do not. I have guys on it. Guys who know something
Marty,
about
I
the
am not
arts.
standing
This
here.
is not naval.
Marty, I
analysis.
am not
You know
standing
better.
here with my hat in my hand. I am telling you, I want back in.
Jack,
Sir,
thank God about Sally.
thank you.
Alice and I are relieved beyond words. You manage any sleep?
Not much, sir.
I'm interrupting something. You were explaining to Jack about how we'd be better off without him around here. Or something along those lines.
I think Harrison Ryan is proactive compared to the other guys, in as much as all the other Ryans, they get pulled into the plot, but HR goes all in from the beginning. First, when he rushes into the fray to save the Royal from getting nabbed, and then after Sean Miller tries to off his family, he's all in on settling the score. Andrew, what do you think of this movie's servings of action versus espionage?
This movie and I think Red October have the best balance. I love a good espionage flick, but I think of the four movies, it's the simplest of the stories because it is, at the end of the day, Sean Bean is trying to get revenge and Jack Ryan's like, well, I need revenge too. My daughter's spleen is missing. It was a good balance.
The action in this feels like a punctuation at the end of each act. It's stripped down to the essentials, very effective in its small dose approach, save for that final sequence. But for instance, the opening kidnapping attempt in London is all of like 2 minutes. Harrison Ford running toward the gunfire is riveting all on its own because he comes off as a regular family man who's in real danger of getting killed. He takes one in the shoulder. He's shocked and upset at killing a few of the assailants. He's an old man out of breath. In the handful of action scenes we get, he's always human, always vulnerable, and that connection with the audience is worth 10 times the explosions and fight choreography that you might see in a Michael Bay movie. I prefer it doled out the way it is here, a lot more than modern flicks. Pat, do you see any major theme in this movie?
Really, revenge is the theme of the film. I think it's silly, too, because you have the character Sean Miller who recruits his younger brother into a terrorist group. He brings his brother along on this terrorist plot to assassinate somebody, and then his brother gets killed, and then he blames it on the unlikely hero, Jack Ryan, which doesn't make a lot of sense in my opinion. He should be looking at himself as the person to blame. He shouldn't have brought his brother in on that stuff at all, but the kid is 16 years old. Revenge definitely is a theme that I noticed for sure.
I'm not too comfortable with themes, though, when there's a light shined on them, but there isn't any opinion on the subject. The revenge aspect of it, I don't really get any commentary from the film. Andrew, can you think of any lesson or opinion the movie makes about it?
The opinion of the movie was that Sean Miller's revenge was bad and that Jack Ryan's was good. With Sean Miller, it's like there's the bigger picture that the IRA fights for, and he's just like, nope, I need to get this middle-aged guy in America and his family. That's ridiculous and silly. But then you have Jack Ryan, his family got. Even his wife is like, no matter what you have to do to get him, get him. His was sanctioned and okay. I guess we could be like, oh, what brilliant duality, but it's also an American movie about an American guy who sticking it to them foreigners. Of course, the Americans' revenge is good.
Both revenge motivators stem from family. Pat, what's your favorite scene or performance?
Collectively across all the movies that we watched was that you do a pretty good job putting together an ensemble cast. I think in this film, you got to call out Sean Bean because Sean Bean's excellent at everything he does, and he does pretty good at being a grizzled, disgruntled terrorist.
He is a good bad guy.
The assault at the end when he's coming in amphibious warfare style is pretty cool.
There's a point where Sean Miller's superior in their terrorist cell says to him that Ryan's not the priority. This other guy, he's our mission. Sean Miller says something like, that's not my mission. And he's just so hot-blooded in that moment.
Yeah, I really like the scene where Harrison Ford is being tailed by that guy in the sweatsuit. It was really quick, but it was nice and tense. I like those types of moments. Catch something in the mirror. Literally, he catches it in the reflection. The movie plays it off as a false flag. But then the way the camera is positioned, you see this guy sneaking up, and Harrison Ford's still like, do, and then he sees the reflection, and then he jukes the guy, and then he gets into a fight, and then someone else shoots the dude right in front of him, so he's rattled. But then he peels out and tries to save his family from an attack. I think that was the best one. There's something about Harrison Ford in action roles. He really can bring the whole fish out of water element, killing's hard type of action star versus almost any other action movie you see where it's just guys are getting greased left and right.
Well, building off of that, I love the scene where Jack is looking over the satellite images and reports with his CIA cubicle crew, figuring out the connection of the red-haired woman like we mentioned. But what sets Jack Ryan apart from some other spy like James Bond? I got Blade Runner vibes. It felt like that scene where Deckard zooms in on the photograph, pulling at the details until the unraveled threads reveal a solution. Swinging it back to what you were just talking about, Andrew. In Blade Runner, Harrison Ford does something similar like he does in Patriot Games, maybe even in a lot of his Indiana Jones stuff. He always has choice moments where he looks genuinely scared.
He's an incredible actor, and he does a great job putting himself into every role. I would agree with you 100% that he does have moments where he looks like he's terrified, fearing for his life. And he is fighting for his life throughout the film.
Tell us your favorite guests and what material you'd like us to cover next by emailing thescreencompanion@gmail.com, visit the Facebook group, or leave comments on YouTube. Support the podcast by subscribing and go to Amazon for the host's second novel, Self-Recognition, a futuristic detective story, available in both print and Kindle. Thank you to everyone stateside and around the world for listening.
Speaking of Harrison Ford's acting chops, when that IRA leader caught him in the hospital and was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't me." When Harrison Ford turns around and points to him with that grimace on his face, I was getting, "You find that man" vibes. It was straight out of The Fugitive. I remember watching this thinking that the scene where Sean Miller and his posse are in the van and they're going to the school because they're going to abduct Sally, how brave was that 10-year-old crossing guard who just stared down a van that was barreling towards her and didn't even flinch, dude.
I don't think she even understood the value of life yet. She didn't understand what could have happened.
She did not give a damn. Yeah, I thought it took me out of it for a moment because I just thought that was wild.
What's your biggest criticism for Patriot Games?
I feel like it's kind of a nitpick. All the other movies are PG-13, but this one's rated R. It's just because the violence is more bloody and there's like 2 F-bombs in it. It's kind of weird to have a franchise where there's like 1 R-rated entry. I think the R rating was unnecessary. It could have been perfectly fine as a PG-13.
Would lowering the rating get younger audiences to want to see it?
Potentially, because you look at Hunt for the Red October, that's not a whiz-bang of an action movie for youngsters or anything. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a PG-13 movie that's not something just full of explosions and Michael Bay-esque. I think you could have a good quality PG-13. It's just because it's that one out-of-place rating and my OCD side is just kind of like, why?
Well, one quick aside about R ratings. Andrew, the next Bond movie, if they made that R, would you hate it?
I'd base it on its merits. I would be disappointed, though. It would disappoint me if they made an R-rated Bond film. I'd be disappointed with an R-rated Star Trek.
The other side to that coin, if it was PG-13, do you think it would have diminished it at all for the adult audience? When this came out, they would go, oh, it's a Tom Clancy espionage movie, and then it's another PG-13. And yeah, like you say, Red October was PG-13, but I would counter that with Red October, there's more of a swashbuckling vibe to it. Sean Connery, Uncle Sean, everybody knows him and loves him from the Bond movies. And Alec Baldwin's a younger dude. That makes more sense maybe with the PG-13.
I think that looking at it, the rating, like I can understand where some people, maybe even myself, would see the rating and be like, oh, it's not for, this isn't going to be smart. It's a PG-13, not an R. I would counter with going back to The Fugitive. That's a very adult and smart film with a PG-13 rating. It didn't need the R. It tells a great story.
Fugitive was 93, the year after Patriot Games. Harrison Ford was just on fire in the 90s.
He's a box office draw in general. They could have gotten away with a PG-13. They could have just taken out one of the F words, I think, and kept everything else the same, because the violence wasn't even that graphic.
How about you, Pat? What's your biggest gripe?
The stakes are too low in this movie, in my opinion. You look at the other movies that we watched, 2 of them are about the threat of nuclear war and the destruction of the United States, and one of them is about the destruction of the U.S. economy. This one's about, one, it's an assassination of the Queen's cousin, the primary focus at the beginning, and then it swivels to a revenge movie against Jack Ryan. It's not part of a deeper plot or anything like that. It's literally just a revenge flick.
Yeah, you're right. I tend to gravitate more toward the smaller stories. This is probably the most boring out of these 4 Jack Ryan movies. For me, that's not a problem, but I have friends that I know if I tried to get them to watch this, they would be looking at their phone half the night.
I wouldn't call it the most boring. I didn't fall asleep during this one.
Does that mean you fell asleep during one of the others?
I did, yes.
I also fell asleep during one of the movies, but I'm not going to tell you which one right now.
Ooh, I wonder if it's the same one.
It wasn't this one.
I like this movie ever since I saw it the first time, I think when I was 10 years old. I mean, I like this movie. I hate the Irish music that plays whenever Sean Miller shows up. I enjoy the composer James Horner most days. He did Wrath of Khan. But here it feels so on the nose. Like, traditional Irish music is all they like. I wonder what foreign composers do when they want to announce that Americans are coming into a scene. Is it rap music? Is it Taylor Swift? But did you guys notice the Irish stuff in the score?
Definitely. I mean, the movie opens with Irish music. All of the movies do it, honestly. Like, in Hunt for Red October, there's clear Russian music and themes throughout that score by the great Basil Polidoris. I don't remember who did the music for Sum of All Fears. Was that Jerry Goldsmith? With that one, there's a scene in Egypt, and you know as soon as it's the Middle East or the Egypt area, the composer's trying to ride that home when you hear like the vocals in the background. When that happened, I just started laughing because it's like, of course they're going to do that. Of course.
Pat, how easy was it to follow the plot in Patriot Games?
What I really like about the Jack Ryan movies is that they're all realistic. They're all plausible in the sense that these are things that could actually happen. I think sometimes in the Bond universe, it can be a little bit gratuitous and over the top. Everything about Jack Ryan, these are realistic scenarios. The technology is very much real.
Yeah, it's not a mastermind trying to create a race of fish people and flood the world.
Exactly.
Andrew, what's the Hunt for Red October about?
Jack Ryan is enlisted to help track down a nuclear submarine with a unique silent propulsion system led by Sean Connery. The Russians are trying to blow him up, the Americans want to blow him up, but Jack has a hunch that he's actually trying to defect.
Pat, what do you think sets Alec Baldwin apart from the others who have portrayed Jack Ryan?
He's pretty ballsy. He's very passionate about what he believes, and he's ready to pursue it no matter what. What comes to mind for me specifically is when he transfers onto the submarine, which is an ill-advised move.
But would you say Alec Ryan is more steadfast in his beliefs and follow-through any more than the other Jack Ryans in these movies?
You might be right. I think it might be an overall character trait that comes up with his hypothesis or theory, and then he really strongly pursues it. We got Ben Affleck, Jack Ryan, who we'll talk about shortly. This is a very similar drive of pursuing what he's going for, pursuing his belief right till the end. I don't know if that necessarily sets him apart, per se.
Andrew, what do you think sets Alec Ryan apart?
I'd say this one's the nerdiest.
Did you notice the turtleneck he's wearing at the very beginning?
Yes. He seems the most like an analyst.
I would agree with that.
Huh. I don't disagree with you, but I can't really point to anything in my head where he's the most analyst-y of them.
Maybe the most analytic is not correct, because now that I'm thinking back, he does do quite a few things on just guesses.
He's pretty geeky, though.
He is. He's more of a historian on the captain, but he doesn't really do a lot of crazy stuff, you're right. Okay, never mind. I take back what I said. He's just a geek.
Is Alec Ryan the most, I don't want to say submissive, I don't want to say effeminate, but you guys get what I'm saying. He's the most,
Does he look like a bitch?
Well, that's one way to put it. The most in touch with his sensitivity.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It doesn't hurt that he's so darn handsome.
No, it doesn't.
I think Alec Ryan is a blunderer compared to the others. He seems to fall when he's trying to get in the sub. Literally, he falls into that, into each phase of the mission to help Captain Ramius defect. It's funny that the guy in his early 30s does even less physical stuff than Harrison Ford did in his late 40s. But based on what we'll see in the next two movies, I applaud the restraint. They don't forget that Alec Baldwin is an analyst. He's not a super spy field agent.
You wish to add something to our discussion, Dr. Ryan? Well, sir, I was just thinking that perhaps there's another possibility we might consider. Ramius might be trying to defect.
Do you mean to suggest that this man has come...
Mr. Ryan.
Ramius trained most of their officer corps, which would put him in a position to select men willing to help him. But he's not Russian. He's Lithuanian by birth, raised by his paternal grandfather, a fisherman. And he has no children, no ties to leave behind. And today is the first anniversary of his wife's death.
Oh, come on. You're just an analyst. What can you possibly know what goes on in this mine?
I know Ramius, General. He's nearly a legend in the submarine community. He's been a maverick his entire career. I actually met him once at an embassy dinner. Have you ever met Captain Ramius, General?
Andrew, do you think the proportion of action to espionage works in The Hunt for Red October?
I don't know if I would consider this an espionage movie. When I think of espionage, I think of spying and I think of trying to solve a mystery in a way. With this one, the mystery isn't really what matters because it's really just about getting to Ramius before anyone else does, in case Jack Ryan is right that he's trying to defect. This is more reminiscent of an old-timey submarine movie where it's just the chase. There's intrigue with the saboteur, but it's not like it's a big reveal who it is. You're just kind of like, oh, it's that guy. Oh, that's weird. That's it. I wouldn't say there's a lot of espionage, really. There's dirty dealings, but I don't feel like there's a mystery. The mystery is he trying to defect? But we as the audience already know that.
The problem is there is a mystery, but it's only for the characters in the movie. The Americans aren't entirely sure that Ramius is trying to defect, and he isn't trying to let off his nukes off the coast of the U.S. like the Russians say he is. So we're in a superior position. We already know the answer to that. What you mentioned with the saboteur on the Red October, that could have been something fun for us to play with. And I was going to joke that saboteur is like the only guy that they have in his own shot on the Russian sub. But then you got actors like Tim Curry in the movie as a Russian. He's the Russian doctor on the sub. Because he gets off the sub at one point. Well, he can't be the saboteur. He's willingly left the sub. I wish they had played with that a bit more. So I thought it was Hollywood politics at play, putting Sean Connery ahead of Alec Baldwin in the opening credits. But Ramius, he's a significant, if not the biggest, part of the story. Pat, did that sit well with you, or do you wish it was centered more around Jack Ryan?
Jack Ryan was still a new character back when this movie came out, since it's the first Jack Ryan movie that came out. The draw was going to be Sean Connery because he was a bigger actor at the time than young Alec Baldwin was. I think that's totally fine that Sean Connery gets the lead billing, and really is a lot of focus on that character. It's definitely a split screen with Jack Ryan and Ramius, the captain of the submarine. The only film where that's as prominent as it is.
I've read 4 or 5 of them, Red October and Patriot Games included. They do a great job, at least in these first 2 movies, of adapting the material. In the Red October book, there's plenty of material on Ramius, and they barely touch on it, his reasons for wanting to defect. And it's too bad that in a movie you gotta truncate a lot of stuff. So Andrew, what was your favorite scene or performance?
Sean Connery's always a gem, but I love a good submarine battle. The ending was just really cool. Yeah, bootstrap Bill Turner leading the enemy sub, and he's trying to sink the Red October. The logistics of submarine combat, going off of sonar, firing blind, essentially. Not blind, but kind of. I love a good moment where it's like, oh no, our missiles are coming back to us. It's just a lot of fun.
Did you notice, Andrew, the enemy Russian sub captain, Stellan Skarsgård, I believe? He was so frickin' sweaty.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I've never been in a sub, but I can imagine those things are saunas in there, packing a bunch of dudes in like sardines.
It makes him look crazed and wrathful, that he looks so disheveled compared to the other subs at play. But also, in the plot, He tells his engineer to kick that engine into overdrive past recommended safety so they can reach Ramius' sub in time. Probably is really hot in there because of that.
Well, I have to say, what stood out for me, I really enjoyed there was a large ensemble cast. This might be the best cast of the Jack Ryan movies because, yeah, we have Stellan Skarsgård. We've got Sam Neill from Jurassic Park fame. You got Sean Connery, who's a gem. You got Alec Baldwin. James Earl Jones is in there. Fred Dalton Thompson as the Admiral. And then you've got the other submarine commander who was the actor. It was
Scott Glenn,
who played Captain Mancuso. But my favorite scene, which I can't think of other times in other films when I've seen this happen, but when the movie starts, Sean Connery and the Russian characters are speaking entirely in Russian, and it's all subtitled. And then there's a scene when he's in his quarters with another man, and they're discussing their strategy, and then it zooms in as one of the guys reading a quote from the Bible. The Russian changes to English, and then it zooms back out, and then they speak English for the rest of the film. So you don't have to read subtitles the entire time, but you know that they're speaking Russian, which is obviously a critical plot point to the movie because they are Russian sailors.
And they did it on a word that is the same in both Russian and English. Armageddon.
There you go. I didn't pick up on that first time I watched the movie, and I remember thinking that again when it came up this time.
Related to that, the last act of the movie, there are Americans and Russians interacting. This never bothered me before, but I noticed it on this watch. Scott Glenn, the American skipper, he ends up giving orders in English. The Russians all seem to understand him, same with Ramius giving the Americans orders. Am I to believe that all of a sudden these guys can understand each other?
It was established that Ramius spoke English.
But what about the other people at the controls?
I think one of the other Russians spoke back in English as well. I think when Mancuso said something, wasn't there like a kind of a smart alecky comment about being able to speak English? Or am I mistaken on that?
I think there might have been, yeah.
I think it was established that he could understand the English. And I know what you're arguing. It didn't bother me at all. Or I didn't pick up on anything that was weird because I felt like the characters who were communicating, they had established that they could understand each other.
Because it felt like on the American side of it, the only one of them that spoke Russian was Jack Ryan. It's a beautiful scene, and I hate to nitpick about it. It really slapped me in the face. Like, I was into it, and from watching this movie previously, I'm like, oh yeah, this is that great moment where the two Cold War sides join together. They're surviving the sub-attack. And then I'm thinking, well, wait a second, Jesus. This is happening too easily. People are saying dive depths. English numbers aren't the same as Russian numbers. How do they know? Do either of you guys have a big issue with Red October?
Ramius would have known that as soon as he went rogue, the Russians were going to try to blow him up. And the Americans would try to blow him up too if they knew about him, which he should have figured. I don't know why he just didn't try to get a message out to the Americans like, hey, I'm trying to defect.
Well, I think it was because he was trying to conceal himself from his crew as well, and any message that was relayed back to him would have had to have gone through his crew. While he's trying to defect, he has to trick his entire crew into believing that he's being a good Russian. While he wants to turn this technology over to the Americans, he has to do it in such a way that his crew believes that he dies a patriot for the country.
You wanted to talk to him, Mr. Ryan. There he is. What do you want to say?
Will he be the only one looking through the periscope?
Probably.
Not a chance then. U.S. told you intend missile launch. Break. Do not approach U.S. coast or you will be attacked. Break. If intention is other, will you discuss option? Break. Can he acknowledge with a single ping?
Yeah, he can. Question is, will he?
Wouldn't his periscope have that Morse code thing too? Why would the American sub have it, but not this super advanced? Do the Russians even use Morse? Everyone uses Morse, right?
But once again, he's got his entire crew on the deck with him, So if he was to sit there and flick a light switch on and off over and over again, the crew would probably figure out what he was saying because they're all trained in Morse.
Also, the designers of this super cutting-edge stealth sub that's supposed to be undetectable, they probably thought about it and said, well, Jerry, why would we give them that feature? Why would the sub ever surface like that and communicate? It's supposed to be underwater the whole time until it's launching its nukes.
So again, that makes sense.
Moving on to Sum of All Fears. Pat, give us a story snapshot of it, if you will.
Ben Ryan, that would be Ben Affleck as Jack Ryan. The film centers on, obviously, tensions between Russia and the United States, once again. The premise is that an old nuclear bomb is found by some scrap metal searchers in the Middle East, and they find it, but it is an active nuclear bomb. It falls into the hands of terrorists who plan to detonate it on American soil with the purpose of launching a war between Russia and the United States. Later in the film, the nuclear bomb is indeed detonated on American soil. It becomes a race against time as Jack Ryan believes that it was not detonated by the Russians, and he's trying to prove that before it's too late.
Andrew, for you, is there anything special about Ben Affleck's Jack Ryan?
No.
Agreed.
He's okay. He's okay. It's Ben Affleck. You could tell he was phoning this one in.
Hello? Kathy?
Hi. So glad you called. I'm running a little late. I'm sorry. Can you come like a half an hour later?
I can't make it. I'm really sorry.
Oh.
It's a last-minute work thing.
What's that noise?
I'm calling from a plane.
Where are you going?
I can't tell you that. Jack.
You can't tell me where you're going?
Jack.
Hold on one second. Yes, sir.
What are you doing?
Oh, I had a date tonight, so I had to call and cancel.
Oh, don't be stupid. Tell her where you're going. In fact, tell her who you work for. She'll be impressed.
Okay. I work for the CIA, and the director asked me at the last minute to come with him to Russia to do a nuclear arms inspection. Hello?
That is so lame.
Kathy, I swear, it's because of the START treaty. We get to inspect to make sure they're really decommissioning their nuclear arsenal. Hello? Hello? Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Pat, what do you think is the pinnacle of Affleck's career?
I love him in Dogma. I think he does a great job in some of his comedy films. But I think if I was going to pick out an action movie of Affleck, The Accountant, I think he's not as good in this film for his action chops.
Is there anything that really stands out about his Ben Ryan?
Not really. I think he's middle of the road Jack Ryan. I think he might be the worst. He's probably my least favorite Jack Ryan, maybe. There's nothing that impressed me about him either way in terms of his action capabilities or his analyst capabilities.
I'm not an Affleck hater. The stuff that I like him in the most is maybe his collaborations with Kevin Smith. I don't think it's his fault. I think it's the producers. This is where the series gets with the times. It's the first Jack Ryan of the new millennium. It feels like intelligence is less valued than youth. Ben Ryan isn't married. He doesn't have kids. He constantly puts his foot in his mouth. I'd label him the annoying Jack Ryan. I want him to sit down and shut up. Don't crack jokes about the new Russian president being a womanizer to his face in an official meeting between the two countries with your boss right beside you. Out-of-place dialogue like that feels right at home with screenwriting of the last decade. You wouldn't see Harrison Ryan making a quip like that in front of the Russian president. I'm having trouble thinking of suspenseful scenes outside of the football game and Ryan's final appeal against using nukes. Andrew, what do you think of the tone of this one?
It's a slower burn thriller, I think, at the beginning, and then things really hit the fan later on. The movie just gasses ahead.
A race against the clock?
It's more like the clock ran out and everyone's just ramping everything up. Things just go from 0 to 100 real quick. They're trying to find this rogue nuke, and they're way too late. All the tension was not around Jack Ryan. Jack, for most of it, was just like, but I know the president, he's not a hardliner. And then everyone else is solving the mystery, and he's just saying the same thing over again and making his Ben Affleck one-liners.
Pat, what was your favorite part?
Well, I will admit this is the one I fell asleep in. The nuclear blast is cool. I think that's well done. The helicopter's coming down, and the scenes immediately after that. The nuclear blast is probably my favorite part.
I honestly kind of like the very, very end, Liev Schreiber, when he's just killing dudes. The bad guys just get taken out in like these assassinations. I thought that was interesting and cool because it wrapped up the bad guys' stories in a nice little bow, but it seemed out of place in a way. For the audience's sake, it just felt like they had to kill them off real fast. But it made for an interesting sequence.
And then they repeat that at the end of Shadow Recruit, where the failed agent gets taken out. Well, as silly as I think this movie is, I would analogize it to Die Another Day and MI2 in their respective franchises. Like Pat said, I love that they actually detonated a nuke on American soil. Even if it was a small nuke, they make a point to say, well, it's not a full yield, it's a little bomb, but, a nuke is still a nuke. They didn't have the balls to do it in Mission Impossible Fallout. Infinity War had half the universe killed, but then they all came back in Endgame. I actually wish they drew that event out more in Some of All Fears. They have Jack Ryan running through the streets with soot on his face. I think he gets out of the chaos a little too easily.
I totally think he does. In terms of a nuke going off, I was interested in it in the sense where, they did detonate it. That's crazy. A hospital where Kathy's working blows up, and then you see the aftermath of that. Of course, the pretty female doctors don't have any glass in their face, but everyone else does. When I was watching it, the nuke goes off, and then they color corrected that movie to hell to drive the point home, like, nukes aren't cool, man. Look how blue everything is. When the helicopter came by to get the president, you would swear that he's in the middle of a desert wasteland, but his car was just kind of flipped over. Very sparse, except for the convenient cars of the people who needed to live. When the helicopter first touched down, I was thinking, like, oh my god, it's the Nazis. They're getting the president. The Nazis are getting the president. They grab him because he's just kind of like, oh, okay, of course he's disoriented. You have these guys showing up in military outfits. I'd go with them if I was the president and a nuke just went off. I wouldn't know any better. And I was hoping it was the Nazis because I thought, like, damn, what a plan. That's really good. They set off the nuke and then they kidnap the president. But also, I'm thinking, they're going to check the cars and they're going to see Morgan Freeman and be like, just leave them. And then they're going to run off and do their Nazi thing. But no, it was actually the good guys.
Morgan Freeman, how does it get lost like that? His vehicle in the motorcade, like right behind the president or something?
Yeah.
That felt contrived just so we could go, what happened to him? Where is he? Does he live?
Yeah, it would be a wasteland really close to the explosion. It was weird to see a bunch of nothingness, but some random cars wrecked.
It felt like something out of Fallout.
Yeah. Maybe they didn't have the budget for the disaster sequence in the Tom Cruise War of the Worlds. The destruction in that movie, just sand effects and blue. It just didn't look good.
For one scene, it turned into Mad Max.
Yeah.
In so many action movies, disasters always averted. So it was interesting that they detonated the nuke, but I felt like in the end, there weren't a lot of consequences to the nuke being detonated. It raised the stakes in terms of there might be an all-out war between the US and Russia, but only one noteworthy character died. I think if you kill the president off maybe in that scene, and then you have the vice president who's now sworn in as president, You can make it more interesting that way. Something like that. I don't know.
I think Jack Ryan in this acts like a one-man CIA. Sending him to Ukraine to hook up with John Clark in a field op, I don't buy that. The amount Jack Ryan gets involved with the plot, especially after the football game, is preposterous. He's an analyst, yet he manages to get on the horn with the Russian president, a hotline reserved for staving off nuclear war, and all those government workers and soldiers let him communicate with the head of state.
Well, didn't he convince, like, a couple-star admiral or something? That would have some pull. You just need the right one.
For you, Andrew, how easy was it to follow this plot?
Of the 4 that we watched, this was the second most involved. Not that it was hard to follow, but it was just a lot going on. The missing scientists and the bomb from Egypt and having to put all of those ducks in a row. Because, yeah, Patriot Games, probably the simplest, because it's a revenge story. And then you have Red October, we know that they're defecting. With this one, we know where the nuke came from. The audience is always in on the mystery on this one, too. There's just a lot going on.
Pat, did the romance subplot work for you?
You've got various stages of Jack Ryan in relationships, and I think this is the weakest in terms of his relationship. I think it was unnecessary, and it didn't contribute to the film at all.
Yeah, even though there is this romance subplot that they try again, even harder in Shadow Recruit. In Sum of All Fears, it doesn't feel like anybody's story. In Patriot Games, we know what's motivating Sean Miller and Jack Ryan. Red October, clear on Ramius' responsibility to his officers, their plot to defect. Sum of All Fears doesn't feel like it has a personal touch to it. Like the American president should have been expanded upon. Set him up with a conflict regarding his ability to push the button and start World War III. Get more into his head. Add some pathos there beyond just the audience not wanting to see the nukes launched. I know more about Scott Glenn's captain in Red October than I do James Cromwell as the president. All the characters are flat in this one. Also, I don't like it when movies do a fake out at the beginning that obviously isn't going to be fake later in the movie. Don't pull that crap with me, especially at the very beginning of your movie. I want to get into it, I want to get invested, and then for you to just go, ah, silly, silly, it was fake, ha ha ha. I hate that so much.
Fair enough.
Didn't bother you guys, huh? What we think is a real DEFCON 1 situation with the president, and it turns out they're just doing a drill.
No, I don't necessarily have a problem with a war game thing in the beginning of the movie that's going to turn into a real deal later on. I think it just depends on how you handle it. That's how they opened Star Trek 2. I think that was well done.
You see demonstrations of how things are supposed to operate. You see training drills in movies before, and then you tend to encounter that real-life situation later in the film, and it's about how do people act differently when the stakes are raised.
The beginning of the movie, what they were doing was the drill. All drills are based around, if nuclear apocalypse was happening, how would we want it to happen? The situation they were in later was the realistic one, where they couldn't plan ahead and get to a safe bunker. It was like, oh, get us up in the air and we'll just watch fire rain down.
But I think it worked more in something like Star Trek 2, because you see how cocky Kirk is. When you see it really happen at the end of the movie, the beginning moments factor more into it. It's there for you to think about. I'm not sure what doing that at the beginning of Sum of All Fears tells us about any of the characters, except I thought it was funny that Cromwell mentions, why don't we try some other bad guy? Why is it always Russia? And then at the end, it is Russia.
Well, it's Nazis that puppeted Russia. I will say I was distracted in the Air Force One scenes by, I don't remember his name in Sum of All Fears, but the guy who played Dr. Kelso in Scrubs was there, and that was distracting to me. There are a lot of actors in all of these movies where I see them and I'm just like, oh, it's that person. Oh, it's that person. In Patriot Games, that old woman that Jack Ryan was working with at the CIA, I think she was in TNG. You have Dr. Crusher play Alec Baldwin's wife for like 3 seconds. Seeing Dr. Kelso on Air Force One kind of took me out of things for a minute.
And in Hunt for Red October, you also see Moriarty.
You're right. Just it's just a who's who.
Tonight's final movie, Jack Ryan, Shadow Recruit, where undercover CIA agent Jack Ryan works at a brokerage firm looking for suspicious foreign trading. He uncovers a Russian plot to send the American dollar plummeting. Ryan gets sent to Moscow to investigate businessman Viktor Sherevin, the lead agent responsible for trying to destabilize the world economy by figuratively and literally blowing up Wall Street. Oh, and there's a shoehorned romance subplot involving Jack's girlfriend, Kathy, played by the insufferable Keira Knightley, flying to Russia and getting embroiled in the whole deal for added melodrama. Let me start this off with Chris Pine's Jack Ryan. What sets him apart from the other Ryans? He's Action Man. He can seemingly do everything. Just like with the writing on his reboot of Kirk, Chris Pine gets hamstrung by the writing in Shadow Recruit.
I started this marathon with this movie. This was my baseline going into it. I feel badly for Chris Pine in this one in a way. He's just there to be Chris Pine.
I like Chris Pine. He just isn't great at Jack Ryan. Just like Ben Affleck, I don't think it's Chris Pine's fault. I think it's the movie's fault.
I agree. One of the knocks I had on Chris Pine in this wasn't the actiony part of him, it was actually the analytic part of him. I just don't see him as being as analytical as his character was portrayed in the film.
What do you think of the franchise's descent into action? If they're not doing the analysis stuff very well, then what else are they going to pay attention to? All the whiz-bang gunplay stuff.
The entire action genre has become more explosions and nonstop action things going on. This one definitely had the most espionage-y feel to it, I think, when he sneaks into the building to steal the information. But it also had the most action-oriented Jack Ryan as well. But I thought what they did well in this film was that they show you his Marine background, because that's something that is a very well-established fact about Jack Ryan. Two things are that he's an ex-Marine and that he's a CIA analyst. So we see that background established in this movie. That was good, I thought.
Jesus, you weren't kidding. You are in the CIA.
Somebody has to be. Why didn't you finish your PhD?
I joined the Marines.
And saved 2 of your men. You handled yourself like a hero. If you still want to serve your country, there's another way.
You're not really in the CIA, are you? What are you? Treasury? Foreign Asset Control?
You know, I'm not supposed to tell anybody what I do for a living. And now look, I've just told you twice.
What do you want from me?
I want to send you back to school to finish your doctorate. Then you'll join financial intelligence as an analyst. You'll work in a series of private banks on Wall Street, or you'll use your position to uncover funding for terror groups.
Covertly.
Yep. So you have to keep it to yourself. Your employers won't know you work for us. People you love won't know you do either. It's going to get lonely, but it's how we like to do things.
You know, people don't like you guys very much these days. Waterboarding, rendition.
Not my unit.
Come on, you can do better than that.
I can, and I do, and so do the people in my unit.
Which unit is that?
The one that makes sure we don't get hit again.
Ooh, if you're gonna show his early career in the military, man, that part at the beginning when he's in the helicopter with his boys, that could have been the whole movie. And then I think Chris Pine would have been excellent. Yeah, that would have taken it a whole other direction if they just showed him as a Marine.
Absolutely. But his Marine career came to a quick end, as we saw in the film.
He doesn't have a good track record with helicopters, does he, in these movies?
No, like I think in 3 movies he ends up coming out of a helicopter.
The wrong way?
That is correct.
Definitely from the 90s when the series started to the 2010s, audiences' attention spans diminishing. If that's the case, why try to reboot Jack Ryan for a modern audience? Who does Tom Clancy appeal to? I think guys like 50 and up, veterans, nerds interested in geopolitics. They don't want Jack Ryan to turn into a second-rate Jason Bourne. And Shadow Recruit doesn't go far enough with the action to appeal to younger people. This happened with Star Trek, trying to turn something smart and complex into surface-level junk you can puff like a vape, blow out the smoke and forget it the second it's over. Something to half-watch while you're scrolling on your phone. Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan isn't well-suited for that. But, Andrew, what was your favorite part in the movie?
The scene where he drowned the dude, and then the scene after with Kevin Costner. That stretch of time is my favorite part of the movie. When he kills the first guy, it's Casino Royale, essentially. He drowns a dude. Technically, Daniel Craig shot that guy, but he did try to drown him. And then when the Kevin Costner thing kicked in, he finally started talking about the plot and the espionage elements of it and the financial collapse. I started thinking, like, oh, this is going to be a hardcore, like, smart movie. Like, they're talking about collapsing the dollar and all these business holdings. And then it did just kind of turn into an action flick. This is the one I fell asleep during. I fell asleep.
Well, I agree 100% about his fight to the death with that guy in the bathroom. Just his bewilderment and how he looks so hopped up on adrenaline. He's not thinking straight, talking to somebody at CIA about what's happening and getting a cleaning crew over there to fix things at the hotel. I think that was maybe Chris Pine's best acting moment because it felt real, it felt motivated. Again, I want the stuff where we see these guys being human, and that was like his Harrison Ford afraid moment.
You and Andrew are both spot on. I think that was a great scene. Yeah, him fighting for his life, and then additionally the follow-up scene when he's talking with Kevin Costner, and it's humanizing in the fact that he's traumatized by this event, and then Kevin Costner talking about the first time he killed somebody. I think he says something along the lines of, you don't get over it, you move past it. As much as this movie wasn't that great, that was a really powerful moment.
I don't understand how the Russians wouldn't get screwed by the American dollar collapsing along with the rest of the world. And if the trigger on this operation was pulled, they gave Sharivin the go-ahead. It was because of a UN vote on a new pipeline going through Turkey, and that undermined the Kremlin. But whatever money they'd lose from a competing pipeline, would that be peanuts compared to a worldwide depression?
I think the Russians were hedging against the collapse so that they would have profited as the dollar went down. And then additionally, they were going to sink money into the deflated dollar. So that way when it rose back up, they would become extremely wealthy. I think that was discussed in the film.
Yeah, and plus, like, they would have some of the only oil, or their oil reserves are more abundant than ours. And so they'd also be able to weather the storm a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
Because as much oil as we produce, we still buy in a lot of oil, too. I think Russia would have been A-okay at the end of it. They gave that information. It was a lot, and it was very quick. And then the rest of the movie was like, whatever.
Action, 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 action.
Yeah.
One of the detriments to making Chris Ryan look smart, even though he is deducing where the sleeper agent is in the U.S., when he's on the plane and they're flying back from Russia to the States, when he's talking with those guys at their computer stations, it's just so rapid fire. This feels way too easy for him to figure this out and get this information going that fast.
You mean like when he was hacking in?
No, when they're on the plane coming back from Russia, leading into the final act where he's dealing with the Russian agent that's hiding out in the US and they're trying to look for him.
Oh, that's right.
It felt a bit CBS CSI logic there where, okay, he's in this picture, and then somebody says, oh yeah, that picture is from this place. And then somebody else says, yeah, and this happened here. And it just seems to happen so fast.
Yeah, I was asleep during that part.
I'll agree with you on that, sir. What I really like about Jack Ryan is that all of his stories are steeped in reality, you know what I mean? Like in very realistic type situations, and definitely this was the least realistic. Collapsing the American dollar is definitely a realistic possibility. A country could do that, I think, but his powers of deduction were just way too fast as they're trying to figure this whole thing out. He's doing it all by himself without like a team of analysts working on this. Why aren't there 300 people working on this threat? Why is it just Jack Ryan?
Taking a second to compare Jack Ryan to James Bond, and so we're closer to comparing apples to apples, let's limit Bond to the Pierce Brosnan era, since they were both primarily in the 90s, both had 4 entries. If Bond embodies British qualities of refinement and charm, what American qualities do you think Jack Ryan represents?
He definitely represents the patriotic, perseverant American in that he's never willing to give up, and he's very much a patriot for his country. He's trying to do best by the American people in everything that he does. I would say that's the biggest piece of Jack Ryan, is that he is a patriot through and through.
And I would like to believe, as far as something Americans can aspire to / relate to, I like that he's usually cool-headed compared to the other people in the room. He doesn't immediately jump to the quickest answer.
And I think what's really nice about him, too, is that he puts the country's interests ahead of his own at times. And that's actually especially evident in Shadow Recruit when it almost ruins his relationship.
Yeah, what did you think of the romantic subplot in this one?
I thought it was better. I thought it was fun. We get her embroiled in the plot, helping with the espionage piece. I thought that was really interesting. I thought it was a cool twist. I thought it could have been done better. My biggest gripe with the movie is when she shows up, he tells her, I'm a CIA agent, and then we're in the room with Costner, and they're arguing, and he says, hey, we had 8 minutes, so you've just wasted 4 of them. We only have 4 minutes. And then the next scene it cuts to is they're in the car on the way to this dinner party that they have to go to. And then they execute the plan to almost perfection when they had almost no time to discuss it. How is it that nobody screws up between either of them?
Divorcing the scenes with Kathy from the actress, because I already said I'm not quite a fan of hers. The scenes with Kathy in Russia, I can see a movie where it's a bit of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. They're working with each other. It's a bit True Lies. But that's a totally different movie. I want this to be a Jack Ryan movie, and when you try to shoehorn in the love interest, she's so awkward that she would fly all the way to Russia, just show up like that in his hotel room, and nobody would stop her at any point. I thought Kevin Costner was shadowing the whole time. Does he not know that she's there and maybe he could shoo her away?
Yeah. It's funny that the Russians know exactly what's going on with her and the Americans do not.
On a character level, who do you like more, Jack Ryan or Jason Bourne?
I'd give it to Jack Ryan, because he's an analyst and you can give him more fish out of water stories, I guess. Jason Bourne's wrapped up. I never watched anything past, was it the Bourne Ultimatum was the end of the trilogy? I was happy with that. With Jack Ryan, you can make him a James Bond-esque character where he deals with whatever's going on at the time, make him a timely character, whereas Jason Bourne's done. He did his thing. Let's just retire that one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Well, let's move on to the final portion of the show, the jack-off. Andrew, which movie had the best action?
Patriot Games.
Pat, the best supporting cast.
Red October.
Andrew, who is the best Kathy?
Patriot Games.
Ann Archer.
Thank you.
That's good, too, since she was also in Clear and Present Danger, so we got more of the best one.
Oh, good.
Pat, which movie had the best locations?
I'm going to say Shadow Recruit.
Andrew, what was the best conspiracy?
I'd say Shadow Recruit.
And this is for both of you guys, starting with Pat. Who was the worst Jack Ryan?
Ben Affleck was my least favorite Jack Ryan.
Yeah, he might be my boy for other things, but he's the worst.
He's a New Englander, like me. He's really into Dunkin' Donuts. He's my least favorite Jack Ryan. Pat, who was the best Jack Ryan?
Harrison Ford. Obviously the best Jack Ryan. I think his movie wasn't the best, but I think he's the best Jack Ryan.
So you prefer Clear and Present Danger?
Clear and Present Danger is a better movie, but I think Hunt for the Red October was the best Jack Ryan film.
I think you could put Harrison Ford's Jack Ryan into Red October and it would be just as good. But I think if you put Alec Baldwin into Patriot Games, it wouldn't work.
I, too, will throw in with Harrison Ford. But after rewatching Red October, it does make me sad we didn't get another turn with Alec Baldwin. So, Pat, which movie do you recommend for someone new to the Jack Ryan flicks?
I would recommend Hunt for the Red October.
I think I would recommend that one too.
Did somebody just stab you over there? I captured the moment somebody killed Andrew.
No, I'm just trying to think. Someone new to it? Honestly, there's a part of me that would say Shadow Recruit, just because I think it's the most modern.
Yeah, I see that argument.
Yeah.
Because it would either be that or Patriot Games. It's a simpler revenge story. There is analytic stuff in it, but it's not as intense as the other movies. Like, he's not solving a mystery, and he doesn't have this crazy hunch. All the movies, he has a hunch except for Patriot Games. I mean, his hunch in Patriot Games is like, this Irishman might try to kill my family. That's not a stretch.
I'm going to come from another angle. I'm going to say Patriot Games, not only because I like Harrison Ford, but also he's the only one to appear more than once. Clear and Present Danger, that's my favorite of them. It's a big reason why I wouldn't recommend On Her Majesty's Secret Service as someone's first Bond. It's in my top 007 list, but if you like George Lazenby's performance, there's nowhere to go because he only did it once. So it's like if you like Chris Pine, well, that's it. You've seen 100% of his Jack Ryan. At least with Patriot Games, there's somewhere to go with that. Get to say, oh, you liked Patriot Games? Guess what? He's in another one. Yay!
If you go with Chris Pine, Jack Ryan, you could then steer somebody towards the Amazon Prime TV show Jack Ryan, which I think is very good. If you like the idea of that character, now see it done well with John Krasinski playing the role of Jack Ryan.
Well, you're jumping into TV territory here.
Sure, I forgot about the show. It's nice to hear that it's good, though.
I really enjoyed the first season, and they just released the fourth and final season. I thought the second season was a little slower, and I thought the third season was more back on track. I haven't seen the fourth season yet.
And the last thing I'll mention is, we name-dropped Air Force One earlier. In the Jack Ryan books, Jack Ryan does become president at one point. I just like to assume he is Jack Ryan in Air Force One, and whenever they call him by that other name, in my head, I just hear Jack Ryan.
It's funny. I didn't know Jack Ryan became president in the books.
Tonally, it fits.
It does.
Very similar tone to these Jack Ryan movies. Air Force One is just the third in his trilogy. You've reached the end of this episode of The Screen Companion. Thank you for listening.